This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine, let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. Welcome, Talk Catholic, the website.com, your host, Tim Kilcoyne. No agendas here, just the straight and narrow, through Mary to Jesus, the Catholic faith proclaimed and preserved. Hope to see you here every week. TalkCatholic.com with Tim Kilcoyne, and we are moving towards Christmas. I can't believe it. My goodness. Because I just began playing the game of golf very late in the season, and this is a great joy for yours truly. I suffered a head neck injury back in 2013 that virtually put me right out of the game, and I've struggled back and forth to be able to play, and I made some serious inroads in that regard in the tail end of the fall. So as one man came up to me after playing, he said, "Boy, you have a beautiful swing. There's such joy in this game, isn't there?" Oh, he was a man after my own. And the highlight of the fall, no doubt, was a particular round of golf with a Father Gary, happens to be a pastor and a very good golfer. Which brings to mind, where are the Bing Crosbys of the clergy today of going my way? Just a thought to ponder. And we just had a wonderful summit meeting in the golf cart as we discussed the ways of the world and the church and the game of golf. That's how it should be, ladies and gentlemen. Holistic integration. And in fact, if you want to take it to that next level, it's called fairways2faith.com. Do give me a call sometime, and maybe I can come out to your parish even during the winter time and try to remember summer. In any event, indeed, find your passion. It's not just one thing or the other. Know your gifts and always try to pursue them because they only bring joy. And speaking of joy, by the time of the airing of this show, we will have had a presidential election behind us and also the end of the second phase of the Synod on Synodality over in Rome. And I just hope and pray that we're still standing. We will get back to our book review, Answers Not Promises, with Mother Mary Angelica in the second part of the show. But I'd like to continue on and follow up with Bishop Athanasius Schneider from his book, Christus Vincit, Christ's Triumph Over the Darkness of the Age. It is so apropos to the times we're in right now, particularly in light of this synod concept, which is an offshoot of the spirit of Vatican II. So I want to return to a little bit of a study overview of Vatican II. We've done this in the past, and I'd like to give it another go, particularly in light of the synod's closing ceremonies. So from the book, Christus Vincit, Diane Montagna, a conversation with Bishop Schneider, asked the question, do you think the council was a mistake? That's getting right to the punchline. The bishop responds, I think history will tell us from a distance. We are only 50 years out from the council. Maybe we will see this more clearly in another 50 years. However, from the point of view of the facts, of the evidence, from a global point of view, Vatican II did not bring real spiritual progress in the life of the Church. After the Council, a disaster occurred at almost every level of Church life. The plan and intentions of the Council were primarily pastoral, yet despite its pastoral aim, there followed disastrous consequences that we still see today. Of course, and I repeat, the Council had many beautiful and valuable texts, but the negative consequences and the abuses committed in the name of the Council were so strong that they overshadowed the positive elements which are there. And Diane asks, what are the positive elements you see in Vatican II? If we look at the span of church history, it was the first time an ecumenical council made a solemn appeal to the laity to take seriously their baptismal vows to strive for holiness. The chapter in Lumen Gentium about the laity is beautiful and profound. The faithful are called to live out their baptism and confirmation as courageous witnesses of the faith in secular society. This appeal was prophetic. Immediately after the council, this appeal to the laity was abused by the progressivist establishment in the church, and also by many functionaries and bureaucrats who worked in church offices and chanceries. Oftentimes, the new lay bureaucrats were not themselves witnesses, but helped to destroy the faith in parish and diocesan councils and in other official committees. Unfortunately, these lay bureaucrats were oftentimes misled by the clergy, by the bishops, and pastors. Well, I should share with you that I just had a nice visit by a 90-year-old most holy priest right here in my home. I do well with 90-year-old priests, by the way. Why would that be? Why would that be? They're not all locked down by the politics in the church, worrying about who's going to hear what I say. On Monday morning, I may have to go to the woodshed. What woodshed? The woodshed called the chancery in your local diocese. And we were talking exactly about this problem of bureaucracy in the church and the problem for, let's say, a new priest coming into a parish or a new bishop coming into a diocese. What is it that they're looking at? They have canonical authority on their side to shape things the way they want, don't they? Well, indeed they do, technically by canon law. But unfortunately, you have what we've referred to in political circles as the deep state. We do indeed have a deep church. And these are the bureaucrats who have inundated the offices of the chancery especially. And I often have asked the question, as I said to Father, I said, Father, these people that are in those chanceries, many of them are not Catholic all the way, like all in, not 1 foot here and 1 foot somewhere else. I say emphatically, not Catholic, not from a classic traditional perspective, that's for sure. And in fact, I went to school with many of them, because most of them are baby boomers, maybe a little younger sometimes, not often. They come from the 1970s when the Great Revolution in theology was taking place, and they bought the whole thing whole hog. Situation ethics, liberation theology, inclusive language, social justice gospel only. They weren't on board with magisterial obedience, dying to know what the catechism says first before they propose their formulations. We talk a good game about collegiality relative to the synod, but in fact, they don't want to hear certain voices that are articulating classic Catholic theology. So what's that all about? I told Father, one of the only priests that I can recall even speaking to this very issue was Monsignor George A. Kelly. We did a book review here, Keeping the Church Catholic, with John Paul II, and he had a whole chapter devoted to the chancery. Ladies and gentlemen, in the political sphere, there's a battle of ideologies, and sometimes it gets pretty heated, as we know, relative to this presidential election. And you have to know where mission control is in order to kind of know where the enemy is. You're not going to do too well if you don't know who's dictating the agenda. I personally, and I'm not referring to this diocese, but there was a particular bishop that I was trying to see not so long ago, and I was denied. And I had run into him 2 and 3 and 4 times for brief minutes at a time, where he was very much encouraging me to be in touch. And he said to me on one occasion, but Tim, you'll have to go through Sister so-and-so. And I just so happened to know Sister so-and-so, who was indeed of those 1970s. And I told the bishop, she is the last person that I will be going through. And he had a smile on his face. I do believe he understood. And unfortunately, well, I saw him, the last time I saw him, he was asking me about my golf game, which is called Diversion Plus. Somebody had poisoned the well. Somebody had obviously spoken ill of Tim, the longtime Catholic religious educator. Couldn't have been that sister from the 1970s, could it? All right, because they don't like my style and my orthodoxy, etc. So it's likely that I may never meet this bishop ever. And this actually happened to me also in another diocese maybe 10, 15 years ago. It's the same deal. You couldn't get through the White House, so to speak. You couldn't get through the chain of command, right? They inoculate the bishop. He's in bubble wrap, so to speak, just the way they want him. They don't want him to be in touch with his flock. That's a little frightening. They might have influence on him. You know, Joe and Josephine, the people that are raising families and know what works. Oh, we can't have them. They're not part of the intellectual intelligentsia, the elites. You know, the modern-day Sanhedrin from virtually every Jesuit university nationwide. Yes, we have them too in the church, and we got to recognize that. And one of our problems has been just keeping that halo on everybody in the church. Nobody gets fired. Nobody gets criticized. Oh no, we can't go there. It's the same as the state. It's no different, ladies and gentlemen. The profile of the deep churcher is no different than the deep state. These are people that like to get things comfortably. They don't create, and they're definitely not faithful, right? They want a decent job that comes with a nice little benefits package, and nobody's ever going to hold them accountable for virtually anything. That's got to be focused on in the church as much as it is in the political sphere. Let us go on. Diane asks, it seems as if the council called for holiness, and instead we got more employees on the payroll, more artificial ministries, and more committees to tell Father what to do. Never in history, the bishop responds, did the church have so many administrative structures as after the Second Vatican Council. The Roman Curia, the diocesan chanceries, and the offices of religious orders were never so bureaucratized as in the post-conciliar period, and this phenomenon has reached its peak in our days. The bureaucratization of the life of the church brought in a strongly worldly spirit and suffocated true spiritual life, supernatural vision, and missionary zeal for the salvation of souls. The time after the council left one with the impression that one of the main fruits of the council was bureaucracy. While it is true that the church, as any human society, needs rules and an order and a precisely formulated code of canon law, nevertheless, this worldly bureaucratization in the decades since the council paralyzed spiritual and supernatural fervor to a considerable extent, and instead of the announced springtime, there came a time of widespread spiritual sterility, a spiritual winter. As Pope Paul VI honestly diagnosed the church's state of spiritual health near the end of his papacy, he said, we thought that after the council there would come a day of sunshine for the history of the church. Instead, there has come a day of clouds, storms, and of darkness. He said this in a sermon on June 29th, 1972. You know, I said to Father in that conversation just the other day, again, I said, think of that good priest that's just coming out of seminary, or, again, a bishop that has just been elected to his episcopate in a new diocese. He's inheriting a whole bureaucracy. At the parish level, the parish council, the DRE, or in the case of the bishop, all these multiple offices of quote-unquote ministries, and they all have a kind of acquired authority attached. Why? Because the people in these chanceries have had their jobs consistently over time. They don't transfer like the priests do from parish to parish. And it's the same as the DRE in the local parish. That person may have been there for 30 years. They've got the deck stacked with their friends. You know, you only pray that it's traditional. But if it isn't, watch out. Because that good holy priest coming out of seminary with a lot of fervor and faithfulness is going to get squashed unless he lays it down, okay, hard, and fires people. Oh, how dare I suggest that people get fired? No, you don't play ball with these people because they're not Catholic, and they haven't been so for a very long time. So in the case of the bishop, the well can get poisoned within just a few short months of his bright-eyed arrival if he thinks he's going to play ball with some of these characters that are just not on board with the new evangelization of John Paul II. That's for sure. You know, so it's a real problem. I've said it to many people in personal conversation. We need a war room for the Catholic Church to expose and identify quote-unquote Catholics who aren't Catholic. They've been under the radar for about 40 years. And I think, indeed, it's time that we just get everything exposed for Holy Mother Church and her renewal. Let us go on. Diane asks, you believe one of the bright lights of the Second Vatican Council was the way it stressed the universal call to holiness. What was happening among concerned laity at the time of the council, and are we beginning to see its fruits? Bishop responds, at that time there emerged a movement of laity who said, we protest the dilution of the faith and the trivialization of the Holy Mass. What we observe is not the faith that was always and everywhere transmitted to our forefathers. This lay movement inside the Church was growing independently, and today it is continuing to grow in strength and numbers in response to the pontificate of Pope Francis. I think that with the tremendous and almost unprecedented interior crisis in the Church we're witnessing today, the hour of the laity has arrived. They also feel responsible for the conservation and defense of the faith. The true intention and teaching of the Second Vatican Council on the laity is being realized now in our days ever more clearly in many meritorious and courageous lay initiatives for the defense of the Catholic faith. We have arrived at a grotesque situation in which the sheep are beginning to unmask the infiltrating wolves in sheep's clothing, i.e., the unbelieving, apostate, and debauched cardinals, bishops, and priests. Just think of the internet stars that we have here today, Taylor Marshall, Tim Gordon, Doug Barry. There's just Anthony Stein, John Henry Weston, just an army of good lay warriors that are now serving as a very healthy check on what's going on at the local parish. I was thinking of one particular parish not so long ago where I was so impressed because all the young people were receiving our Lord not only on the tongue, but they were hitting the deck on their knees, literally the floor, no kneelers, but they just went right down. Might have been one of the most beautiful witnesses of the faith I've personally ever seen. And it was virtually everybody under 16 years of age. Well, sadly, at that same church, not too long later, all the kids were receiving our Lord in the hand, and I witnessed some of them not even putting Jesus in their mouth. I promise you, there's the discrepancy between the deep church and the true church that's being articulated over the airwaves in total fidelity, not to the spirit of Vatican II, but to the letter of Vatican II. And we will do the same right here at WQPH Radio 89.3 FM on the other side. Mother Mary Angelica's answers, not promises. Well, no matter what happened on November 5th, the Daughters of St. Paul will sing to you regardless. There's an angel by your side.
I can't say that everything's okay, 'cause I can see the tears you're crying, and I can't promise to take the pain away, but you can know I won't stop trying. I'll be the angel by your side. I will get you through the night. I'll be the strength you can't provide on your own. 'Cause when you're down and out of time, and you think you've lost the fight, let me be the angel by your side. I know it feels like you're running out of faith, 'cause it's so hard to keep believing. But if I can bring a smile back to your face, then for a moment you'll forget about it. I'll be the angel by your side. I will get you through the night. I'll be the strength you can't provide on your own. 'Cause when you're down and out of time, and you think you've lost the fight, let me be the angel by your side.
Well, we're in the chapter on how can I overcome lust? Is this not a relevant chapter? As I walked into a grocery store just tonight and was more or less assaulted by propaganda that was trying to get me to sing praises for a variety of perverted lifestyles that are not part of my Catholic faith. And this is a grocery store. I assume that if I don't get on board with what they're proposing here, I won't be able to get my food pretty soon. Don't think that that is not a possibility of the New World Order communist agenda. Oh, indeed it is. When grocery stores are trying to put it in your face as far as what they think is God's design for human sexuality, I don't think so. And I will, in time, be calling that management team and saying, well, how about a little diversity? Can we not bring in some Catholic literature at the front door of this grocery store as well? Oh, I don't think that'll go over too well because of the double standard where people who are living sordid, that's right, that's the word, lifestyles, are so angry and so guilty that they just got to get rid of the other people, which is the overwhelming majority of us. We got to put a stop to it by standing up to it. And it starts with chapters like this. And the subtopic here today is pleasure without responsibility. Mother Angelica says, believe me, it's not my goal in life to wrap anybody's knuckles. I've got plenty to do without having to chase people around with a ruler. But if you are wrestling with a sexual temptation right now, there's a good chance that you feel confused and on a certain level uneasy. Admittedly, lust is not something that I wrestle with, but like all human beings, I wrestle with other temptations constantly. I know how it feels to want to throw in the towel and then regret it. I am not perfect, and in other words, and in other ways, I know exactly what you're up against. If you are wrestling with a sexual temptation right now, your uneasiness is the infinite in you that longs for something better. I suppose many people would describe your uneasiness as Victorian shame or embarrassment or some kind of repression, but from a spiritual standpoint, I can tell you that it is simply your soul longing to stay united to the will of God. This is why those who indulge their lust inevitably feel a sense of guilt or disgust, and let's not forget anger on the part of certain groups. Why are we surprised that lusting for someone outside your marriage leads you to feel discontented and trapped? That committing adultery leads you to feel guilty and lose your self-respect? That reading adult magazines and more common internet browsing leads you to boredom and numbness to the beauty and gift of sexuality? The problem with sexual indulgence is that once the initial moments of pleasure are over, an uneasiness can set in. You know you've done something wrong. It's cheating on your spouse or watching the X-rated films. There is a part of you that says, hey, buddy, you just crossed into some pretty dangerous territory. At first, you might feel discontented, guilty, and degraded. Eventually, you're able to rationalize whatever it is that you are doing. Once the sin has become a habit, a certain numbness sets in, and you start slipping farther and farther away from any sense of right and wrong. And I would add, you begin to jump on political party bandwagons and try to indoctrinate everywhere and force your views on others. That's what's going on, ladies and gentlemen, in our society right now. When I simply walk into a grocery store and I feel like I just walked into Planned Parenthood, okay? At some point, the brokenness of the family over 40 years was going to kind of have its way. And that's exactly what we're witnessing. I feel sorry for so many of the people like those at the Olympic opening ceremonies, okay, because they're hurting. We need to pray for them, no doubt. But don't force us to just give you a standing ovation. Sorry. And then you use the rainbow to try to justify the lifestyle. Well, the rainbow is a biblical symbol that suggested, more than suggested, that God was not going to wipe out the human race like he did in the time of the flood. Again, that doesn't mean that God was going to tolerate every form of perverted lifestyle on the face of the earth. Follow the pattern that Mother Angelica is talking about here. So we got the habit, now we got a numbness to right and wrong. And as the sense of right and wrong becomes distorted, she says, the sexual temptations become hard to shake off. Why? Because sexual pleasures always bring immediate gratifications, even if those gratifications are accompanied by guilt or remorse. This is why it's so terribly hard to overcome temptations to lust. But the difficulty shouldn't be the rationale for not trying. The allure shouldn't be the rationale for sin. As Christians, we shouldn't be afraid to aim for holiness. We shouldn't be put off by sacrifice. We shouldn't hesitate to set our sights on a higher existence, no matter how many times we may fall. This, ladies and gentlemen, is the difference between, let's say, a bygone atheism or even paganism that at least acknowledged that there was a bar of moral perfection. They mocked it, but they didn't deny it, that it existed. We're living in a time where they don't recognize the bar. Oh my word. This is insanity on steroids, ladies and gentlemen. Your mother goes on. The fact is that when you try to shake off responsibility for your pleasure, whatever the pleasure may be, there's going to be a price to pay. People who think that you can have it both ways have bought the great lie. Somebody at some point is going to have to ante up for the so-called good times. Now, there are some who would sit back and smugly say, well, they got what they deserved. But I don't subscribe to that attitude. I'm worried about something far more important than your getting billed with an invoice for your transgressions. I'm worried about your soul. I'm worried about your sanctity. I'm worried about the fact that sin affects not only you, but your neighbors, your world, and your God. Look at popular thinking today. Quote, what's the worst that could happen? If I get pregnant and he won't marry me, I'll just have an abortion. They are willing to sacrifice a human life for the pleasure of a love affair. Or, one night on the town won't hurt. If my wife finds out, she can divorce me. They are willing to profane the sacrament of marriage for sex with a stranger. Or, God made me a homosexual, so why not have affairs with other gay men? They are willing to defy God's plan just to get physical satisfaction. If you carefully consider each of those statements, you will see a gross insensitivity to the reality of sin and to the fact that they are gambling with their eternal life. These thoughts are not thoughts of mentally ill people. These are the thoughts of common everyday folks. This thinking process is so misguided, so self-centered, and so diluted that it boggles the mind. If you asked a philosopher to diagram the logic of this thinking, he would laugh. There is no spiritual intelligence at work here at all. It is the hapless excuse-making of self-indulgent people who are deluded by lies and are oblivious to the fact that they are destroying their own souls in the process. All extremely good reasons that we here at WQPH Radio 89.3 FM will not be deluded by the evil woke agenda. Have a great week, everyone. God bless. Let your light shine. That is what it's all about here at WQPH Radio 89.3 FM. But we need to hear your story. You want your voice to be his voice. That is making the faith known to others. Please, my number is 877-625-3727. Tim Kilcoyne, TalkCatholic.com. St. Mother Teresa told us, your ministry is your work right where you are. Grab on to this microphone. God bless.